YouTube. This is going to be the video about the Bible cover up. Well, if the Bible is true, why don't they find evidence for it? They do. There's just been a massive cover up. So let's start off with the Jews. This is a quote from Mark Twain, 1899. Now remember, this is before the Holocaust. This is before they were almost exterminated off the face of the planet. What is the secret to the immortality of the Jews? It is the promise God made. There is no other explanation for how the Hebrews would have survived all this oppression if not for the hand of God guiding them and protecting them, as he promised through Abraham and the other prophets. He has made a marvelous fight in this world, in all the ages, and has done it with his hands tied behind him. He could be vain of himself and be excused for it. The Egyptian, the Babylonian, and the Persian rose, filled the planet with sound and splendor, and then faded to dream stuff, and passed away. The Greek and the Roman followed, and made a vast noise, and they are gone. Other peoples have sprung up and held their torch high for a time, but it burned out, and they sit in twilight now, or have vanished. The Jew saw them all, beat them all, and is now what he always was, exhibiting no decadence, no infirmities of age, no weakening of his parts, no slowing of his energies, no dulling of his heart and aggressive mind. All things are mortal but the Jew. All other forces pass, but he remains. What is the secret of his immortality? Well, this doesn't even cover all the times Israel's been almost obliterated from the face of the planet. This is just like, why are the Jews still here? It's been so long, and the Jewish people, they're still homogenized. It's like, well, let's get into the details of it. The Romans destroyed the second temple and cast them to the four corners of the earth, oppressed their religion in all the Roman Christian countries, basically divorced from the Torah. The Greeks tried to exterminate their religion as well. The Babylonians destroyed their temple. The Amalekites, like every single civilization in that area tried to destroy these people. None have succeeded. This is the only people who has ever had everything taken away from them, and they just come back and rebuild like nothing ever happened. Didn't happen with the American Indians. All those languages lost, all those peoples scattered, dwindled down to almost nothing. This has not happened with any other civilization, any other race. God made a promise to Israel. That's the only reason it didn't happen to them. So we have the book of Judges, I believe chapters 6 through 9. There's a story of Gideon, and Gideon is chosen by God to be a prophet, and he destroys a shrine for Baal, and he gets the nickname Jerubbaal. This is an archaeological piece of evidence to support this story. A 5-letter inscription appearing to represent the name Jerubbaal, another name used in the Hebrew Bible for Gideon, was discovered on a 3,100-year-old fragment of a jug in Israel. According to Smithsonian Magazine, the artifact's age lines up with the time period depicted in the book of Judges. So we know that Jesus existed as a historical figure, but even his own enemies admit he had he had miraculous powers. So the Talmud, which is the leaven of the Pharisees, the rabbinical order that appeared after the books of Maccabees when they were rebuilding their civilization because of the Greeks, well, the Pharisees were corrupt. And when Jesus brought the true version of Judaism, the Pharisees didn't want to hear it. So they tried to kill him and exterminate his perfection from the face of the planet. So some of the lies they told about him was that he was a sorcerer, that people were healing in the name of him, he was a Torah teacher, and they claim he was a disciple that turned out badly. And they claim that he practiced magic, and that he was executed, and that he's the son of Mary. So they gave a corrupted version of the Gospels, essentially. They accused him of this in the Gospels, that he cast out devils by the prince of devils. So Jesus had miraculous powers. Even his own enemies admitted it. If he was faking the miracles or the miracles never existed, they wouldn't have the need to write these things. But if he really did have these powers and they refused to accept him, they would have needed to make an excuse for why his powers were not from God. And that's what the Talmud does. So, John of Patmos was boiled in oil, according to the early Christian writer Tertullian, who probably, he received this information elsewhere, but it was first preserved by Tertullian. Now, we know that Jesus promised John in John 21 that he would wait here until the second coming, that some here would not see death until the second coming of Jesus. Peter asks him in John 21, "Sir, and what of this disciple?" And Jesus said, if I wish for him to wait here until I return, what is that to you? Follow me. And then there went a rumor among the disciples that John would not die. Well, John is the only disciple that there's not a body for. He's the only unaccounted disciple. Now, was John hiding? Was he a coward? Did he go into a cave somewhere and lock himself in and not preach the Bible? No. He was the only one who couldn't be killed because Jesus would have been made a liar had he been killed. Nobody has a body for him. Nobody knows when he died, where he died, how he died, but he's definitely not a martyr. He's the only one who was not martyred except for Judas, who obviously killed himself. So if John survived everything, the most famous thing is that he was apparently boiled in oil by the Emperor Domitian and nothing happened. And when that didn't work, they took him, they threw him on the island of Patmos and said, "Go away, be quiet, we don't want to deal with you. You're immortal, fine, go be immortal somewhere else." And that's where the book of Revelation was written. So it's very interesting, because okay, you want to prove the Bible wrong, go bring John and kill him and show everybody, see, I got his head right here. He lied. Jesus lied. Look, I got his head right here. I killed John. The promises aren't true. See, I killed him. You couldn't do that. All you had to do was kill John, and you could have disproved Christianity. Didn't work. So this is a Chinese writing. Very interesting. So many book burnings. It's hard to know what we used to know before these book burnings existed. But summer fourth month of the year, on the day of Renwu, the imperial edict reads, "Yin and Yang have mistakenly switched, and the sun and moon were eclipsed. The sins of all the people are now on one man. Pardon is proclaimed to all under heaven." History of later Han Dynasty, Volume 1. Chronicles of Emperor Guangwu 7th year. Dated 31 Anno Domini, 31 AD. Yin and Yang have switched places. Sun and moon are eclipsed. The sins of all people are on one man. Pardon is proclaimed to all under heaven. The crucifixion. Nebraska Man, a very famous evolutionary hoax. A putative species of ape. It was originally described by Henry Fairfield Osborne on the basis of a tooth found by a rancher. So they claim that this is a proof of a missing link. I think it was a pig tooth. So they claim, like, hey, we found a tooth. This is a missing link. And, they had to prove evolution. There's no proof. There's nothing that says ape, human. Not gradually, not quickly, nothing. There's no jump. Humans are humans are humans are humans. Period. So Lucy, the baboon, they found a baboon bone in the famous Lucy skeleton. This is the New Scientist. This is not a Christian page. This is a scientific page. New Scientist is basically what you would expect from like a research lab. So they found a baboon bone in the famous Lucy skeleton. Well, I thought that Lucy was supposed to be proof of the missing link. They were like, hey, this is an Australopithecus. You're going to learn about this because you go to 6th grade public school and you got Australopithecus and you got the Homo erectus, and you got the Homo sapiens and blah, blah, blah. So they said this was our missing link, but they found a baboon bone inside of this thing. So clearly this was another hoax. Piltdown Man. This is one that Charles Darwin is responsible for. A fraud perpetuated by the man who had to prove that we didn't come from God, we came from monkeys. Let me just say real quick, the theory of evolution is blasphemous because the Bible says we are made in the image of God, and then the theory of evolution says we came from monkeys. So God told us in the Bible, if you don't believe in the Bible, if you don't believe in God, just hypothetically, the Bible says we are made in the image of God, that God resembles humanity, that every description of God's body, he has white hair, he has a face, he has hands, he has feet, he has back parts. Like, he is, for all intents and purposes, he looks like a human being, just with so much more beauty and glory, that too beautiful to look at and survive. And he has a white robe and he sits on a throne. We are made in his image. That's what the Bible teaches. But the atheists tell us that we come from monkeys. And Charles Darwin is responsible for this fraud. So, the Piltdown Man. Although there were doubts from its authenticity virtually from the beginning, yeah, because the Christians wouldn't accept it. Those are the only doubts. I'm sure the scientists are like, you see, we don't need the Bible anymore. We found proof we come from monkeys. Shut up, Christians. Go get your vaccines. So the remains were still broadly accepted for many years, and the falsity of the hoax was only definitively demonstrated like 40 years later. An extensive scientific review in 2016 established that amateur archaeologist Charles Darwin was responsible for the fraudulent evidence. The dude responsible for the theory that we come from monkeys is the one who made false evidence that we came from monkeys. So this should just, like, if you found this in the church, you wouldn't believe that church, would you? If you found this in the Bible, you wouldn't believe this in the Bible. Why do we give these scientists the benefit of the doubt? So this is proving the genealogies, Genesis chapter 10. Okay, so Genesis chapter 10, Noah has 3 sons and they have 3 wives, and Noah has a wife. It's not clear if Noah and his wife have any more kids, but Noah's 3 sons have many, many children. And from these children comes all the people of the earth, all races trace back to Noah's 3 sons. So you can actually trace, you can type the names of the children of Noah and Noah's sons and Noah's sons and etc. etc. You can type the names in Wikipedia and you can find many people who trace back to them. So you like Bulgar, the founder of the Bulgars, Ujur, the Uyghurs, the Taris, Tori, Avar, the Avars, Ugus. So like all these peoples, I don't think these ones are in the Bible though, but like many of the people in Genesis 10, if you type their names, you will find like, oh, this is Magogia. This is Gomer is Samaria. It's like they know who these people were. They know the civilizations they built. Mitzrayim is Egypt. The Philistines come from Egypt. So Khazar is a personal name with its origins in Turkic and or Slavonic languages, a founding myth among the Khazars as related in the texts such as the Khazar correspondence, held that they were founded by Khosar, which I believe is written as Bozar in the Bible, a son of the biblical figure Togarma or Togarmas. So these are not Hebrews. These are far removed from the land of Israel. And yet they believe in the genealogies in the Bible. Why is Israel so special? It's this tiny little piece of land in the middle of the desert. And all these peoples trace back to it. So here we see evidence of dinosaurs, also known as dragons. They did not exist millions of years ago and get wiped out by a flood. They lived among us. There are many writings in the Bible and in pagan myths about dinosaurs. They call them dragons. In the apocryphal Greek chapters of Daniel, Daniel actually kills one of these things. So, yeah, dragon slayers. So here we see some discoveries that line up with the Bible, such as the caves of Qumran, where they found the Dead Sea Scrolls. Dead Sea Scrolls confirm that the Bible that we have is accurate. And we see a list of inscriptions of biblical archaeology, a list of burial places of Abrahamic figures, a list of Bible manuscripts, and biblical figures identified in extra biblical sources. So the Bible's historically accurate. It's genealogically accurate. It's prophetically accurate. The wisest people on earth, and the Freemasons, who I consider to be very wise but very wicked, they know that the Bible's true. The wicked, wise people know that the Bible's true and fight against it anyways, which is the dumbest thing. All right, so check this out. Who are the Hebrews? Well, I believe that the first reference to the Hebrews in the Bible, let me see if I can find it real quick. I think it was definitely to Abraham. I don't remember when they first call him a Hebrew. I think it was when he conquers, I think it was around the time of Genesis 14 or 15. But they say Abraham, okay, Genesis 14:13. And there came one that had escaped and told Abram the Hebrew. So Hebrew, this word would have been known about 2,000 years before Christ. In the time of Rimsin I, 1822 BC to 1763 BC, the Sumerians knew of a group of Aramaean nomads. Abraham came from the land of Aram in Mesopotamia. It's not in the King James Bible, but if you look at the Hebrew manuscripts, it definitely says in Genesis 24, verse 10, the servant took 10 camels of the camels of his master and departed, for all the goods of his master were in his hand, and he arose and went to Mesopotamia unto the city of Nahor. Well, in the Hebrew it says Aram here, which is basically the name for Syria. So Abraham sent his servant to go find a wife for his son Isaac in the land of Aram, where he came from. And it just so happens that he found like a cousin of his family. So a group of Aramaean nomads from Syria, where Abraham is from, where Isaac's wives are from, where Jacob's wives are from. And Jacob's wives are related to Abraham's wives, are related to Abraham. It's basically the same people. Abraham comes from Syria. Isaac's mother comes from Syria. Um, Isaac's wife comes from Syria. Jacob's wives come from Syria. They're Arameans. Aramean nomads living in southern Mesopotamia as sagas, which meant trespassers. The Akkadians called them the Habiru, properly Apiru. Abraham the Hebrew, from the name Eber, which there was a Muslim who claimed that after the division of tongues, that Eber didn't help build the Tower of Babel, so his language was not corrupted. So the Hebrew language comes from Eber, which is the Adamic language. But all the other peoples who helped build the Tower of Babel, their languages were confused. So Eber, Hebrew, that's where the name comes from. So the Hebrews, they're Aramean nomads. Nomads means they leave the place of where they came from, they go wander. Well, that's the story of Abraham and his children until they settle in Egypt and they're cast out and they finally settle in the Holy Land. Aramean nomads called Habiru. The term occurs in hundreds of second millennia BC documents covering a 600-year period from 18th to 12th centuries before Christ. And they're found in Egypt, Canaan, Syria, and Nuzi, which is northern Iraq, and Anatolia, Turkey. So, yeah, this is consistent with what the Bible teaches. The Apiru, also known in the Akkadian version as Habiru, is a term used in 2nd millennium BC texts throughout the Fertile Crescent for a social status of people who are variously described as rebels, outlaws, raiders, mercenary bowmen, servants, slaves, and laborers. Habiru, the Aramean nomads from Syria, where Abraham fled. Here we see in the days, takeover of regional cities by the attacking bands of people, the Hapiru. So these are the Amarna letters. These are letters written to the kings of Egypt by the people of Canaan, who were their tributaries, and like, dude, we're getting our asses kicked by these Habirus, send help. Well, this would have been around the days of Joshua or Moses, so this would have been maybe 1,400 years before Christ, give or take. So EA 273, the Amarna letter 273. Say to the king, i.e. Pharaoh, my lord, my God, my son, I fall at the feet of the Lord, of the king, my lord, 7 times and 7 times. May the king, my lord, know that war has been waged in the land, and gone is the land of the king, my lord, by desertion to the Apiru, desertion. So they're deserting the lands, they're fleeing their lands, just like Moses said, just like Joshua said. You will take these lands, and they will flee from before your face. They're deserting their lands to the Apiru. May the king, my lord, take cognizance of the land, and may the king, my lord, know that the Apiru wrote to Ayaluna and to Sarha and to the 2 sons of Milikilu barely escaped being killed. May the king, my lord, know of this deed. Another city lost. 274, another city lost. Say to the king, my lord, my God, my son, blah, blah, blah. May the king, my lord, save his land from the power of the Apiru, lest it be lost. So these Aramean nomads are conquering Canaan, just like the Bible says. Amarna letter 271, titled The Power of the Apiru, is a moderately short, tallish, rectangular clay tablet letter from the ruler of Gazru. I wonder if this is Gaza. 14th century, mid-14th century BC Amarna letters. That would have been around the time of Joshua and the Judges. So yeah, many of these letters are talking about how they're getting their asses kicked by the Habirus. I think this is 271. Say to the king, my lord, my God, my son, message of Milikilu. May the king, my lord, know that the war against me and against is severe, so the king, my lord, save his land from the power of the Apiru. Otherwise, may the king, my lord, send chariots to fetch us, lest our servants kill us. Moreover, may the king, my lord. So yeah, the Apiru, these Aramean nomads, are conquering the land of Canaan. Actually, the Bible's not historically accurate. We don't think Joshua's a real book. We don't think it's actually historically accurate. We think it was written in the Second Temple period. Then why does this Amarna letter confirm what the book of Joshua says? Explain that to me. Yeah, Biru Apiru. The mention of the Habiru shows the conflict of the time as the takeover of city-states or regions by the Habiru. The map shows various cities and regions and their respective dealings with the Habiru. There are only 3 letters from Labaya of Sakmu Shechem. The next closest mention of the Habiru is from the Jerusalem letters of Abdi Heba, directly south of Jerusalem, Letters EA 286, 87, 88, 89, and 290. I think there were a few others as well. So the Amarna letters talk about the Hebrews kicking their asses, taking their lands. And it happens in the exact same time it happens in the Bible. So the Bible is historically accurate, whether you like it or not. So you better take it seriously, otherwise you don't have a choice what's going to happen to you when you die. So here is, let's go a little further back. So this is the Ipuwer papyrus, which is basically an Egyptian account of the 10 plagues of Egypt. So we see in Exodus, Torah, Exodus 7:20, all the waters of the river return to blood. Plague is throughout the land. Blood is everywhere. The rivers of blood. Men shrink from tasting human beings and thirst after water. That is our water. That is our happiness. What shall we do in respect thereof? All is ruin. Like everything in the Bible is confirmed by external sources. So there was blood throughout all the land of Egypt. The river stank. All the Egyptians dug around the river for water, for they could not drink the water of the river. Fire runs along the ground. Hail. Forsooth, gates and columns and walls are destroyed by fire. Lower Egypt weeps. The entire place is brought without its revenues. I mean, it's just amazing. So here's a few others. You can look into it. These are the Ipuwer papyrus. Ipuwer papyrus. Very interesting stuff. The Shasu of Yahweh. Two Egyptian texts, one dated to the period of Amenhotep, 14th century BC, and the other to Ramesses, 13th century BC, refers to the land of the Shasu of Yahweh, also rendered as Yahweh or Yahu. Well, we didn't know the name of Yahweh until Moses, which was around 1500 years before Christ. So, the oldest text saying the name Yahweh around 13th century, 14th century, yeah, that's accurate. The Shasu of Yahweh. We didn't know the name Yahweh until about 1500 years before Christ. Here we see they're calling them the Shasu of Yahweh. Here we see some myths about the creation of life from clay. This is not just a biblical... Nobody says, oh yeah, we used to be monkeys, then we became people. There is not one oral tradition about this, one written tradition, nothing. But people being made from clay by gods, oh yeah, you find that everywhere. And it's a corruption of the story that Yahweh told to the Hebrews, to Moses, to Abraham, to Noah, to etc. They took these stories that were everybody knew about them after the flood, and they corrupted them. That's why the Greeks say that Prometheus did it. That's why the Babylonians say that Enki did it. The Hawaiians say that their gods did it. All these different pagan myths say that humanity was made from clay, there was a great flood, and there was a confusion of tongues. So we got to find out which one of the pagan myths is true. Well, it's not a pagan myth. It's the monotheistic Yahweh worship of the Hebrews. So we see the confusion of tongues, the Sumerian and Assyrian parallel. Sumerian myth similar to the Tower of Babel. The flood myth, I mean, this is everywhere. A great flood myth. They even have one in Mexico where it's like the guy and his family build a boat and they take animals and they release a dove. I mean, it's crazy. It really is crazy how these myths are everywhere. The Bible is true whether you like it or not. That or people are just spreading these myths all over the world and keeping it a secret. And then we're rediscovering these myths a long time later. And it's like, these Hebrews, they're scheming again. They're spreading their religion all over the world and they're not letting us know about it. There's a cover-up in the archaeological record. And it's the Hebrews spreading their religion. Atum, which is similar to Adam, I believe this is a Egyptian version of Adam, is the primordial god in Egyptian mythology from whom all else arose. So he's the first god and all the other gods come from him. Well, we know that in Egypt, their gods are basically people. So the first human being is Adam and the first god is Atum. Okay, that was a mistake. The Tel Dan stele is a fragmentary stele containing an Aramaic inscription. So that's the Syrian language, which dates to the 9th century before Christ. Earliest known extra-biblical archaeological reference to the House of David. The Deir Allah plaster inscription, also known as the Balaam inscription, Balaam son of Beor inscription, is proof that Balaam son of Beor, who lived at the same time of Moses, is a real person, and he conspired against Israel. He taught the Moabites to get the Hebrews to transgress the law of Moses so that they could be conquered. And nobody could have confirmed he was real until this inscription, which was found in Jordan, where he went to the king of Moab. He went to Moab in Jordan and he taught them how to conquer Israel. So not only is he a historical figure, but the historical artifact lines up with where he went in the Bible. The Bible says that he came from the mountains of Aram to Jordan to Balak, son of Balak, king of Moab. So he goes to Moab in Jordan to teach them how to conquer the Hebrews. And this text calls him a prophet. It calls him a seer of the gods. So this is a discovery from like 3,000 years after. Let's round up to 2,000. 3,500 years after the story in Numbers, we find a text. 3,500 years later, a Bible story is confirmed. It's ridiculous. How are you going to... And the thing is the cover-up is so pervasive. You know, I fell for atheism at one point. I didn't have all the facts. There's a huge cover-up. There's a huge cover-up. All the book burnings, all the genocides, all these pagan myths basically align with the Bible, but all the pagan myths were conquered and burned. Pilate Stone calls Pontius Pilate a prefect of the Roman province of Judea, 26 to 36 AD, found in 1961 in Caesarea Maritima. So yeah, Pontius Pilate's a historical figure. We can prove it. Mordecai served in the court of Xerxes and Darius the Great. Mordecai and Esther in the book of Esther. Their tombs are in Persia, which is called Iran now. And their tombs were firebombed on Purim, either this year or last year, by the Iranians. So their tombs are in Iran, and they were bombed. They were Molotov cocktailed by these filthy Amalekites who wanted to exterminate Judaism, the true religion, the religion Jesus followed, off the face of the planet. The truth is the Torah, the prophets, and Christ. Okay? Anything that does not affirm the Torah, the prophets, and Christ, throw it away because it's not from God. Here we see Jabal Maqla, Saudi Arabia. This is Mount Horeb, also known as Mount Sinai, which Paul wrote is in the land of Arabia. And yes, Jabal Maqla is in northern Arabia, Saudi Arabia. And it melted. When God spoke the 10 Commandments, he melted the mountain. Well, look at that. Igneous rock, black rock, melted by fire. Here we see a depiction of what looks like the Hebrews worshiping their gods, their golden calf gods, giving sacrifices to it. Also on Jabal Maqla. Here we see the rock that Moses split in half to draw water from. This is also in the book of Exodus. I believe it was around Exodus chapter 17. So they go to Mount Horeb. They draw water from the mountain. God tells them that, sanctify yourselves for 3 days and I will speak to you from the fire. Well, this is Mount Horeb. This is Jabal Maqla. Look at that. Still melted. Okay, so that was the last of it. So I hope you learned something. There's been a massive cover-up. The Bible's accurate, but yeah, there's just Satan's real, and Satan's conspiring against the truth, and that's the only reason why the world is the way it is. The Bible's true. Everybody must know that the Bible's true. You don't need all the details to know the Bible's true, but you need to know the Bible's true, and you need to abide by what the Bible teaches. Follow the Torah. Christ is your Lord, and the Temple Mount, Mount Zion, that is the house of God. Pray towards the Temple Mount. Always pray that God's will be done because his will is more powerful than ours. And if we align our will to his will, he will fight our battles. So God's will be done. Christ is Lord. Keep the law of Moses. God bless.